go to this video and then they'll see in the chat that they need to go to a new link.
In the comment?
Yeah, so right now we're live on the test site and we're gonna post the link to that site. And so people will be able to see it. There we go. So it looks like we are live. Sorry, we had some technical difficulties. We are now posting in the link that will direct people here. If you post, hopefully everyone will click on this link that we posted in the previous chat and they'll come on over here. And since we are live now, we will take this video and we'll edit out this entire part. So it'll just be an introduction. Looks like we are good to go. Looks like our friends are all chiming in that we are online. All right. Aloha, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Apologize for the technical difficulties. We are getting used to our new quarantined world and how we have to have conversations entirely through Zoom meeting. And so we're just figuring out how to do that. It looks like we've got a workaround. So my name is Samuel King II. I'm the Executive Director of IMUA TMT. We are here today to discuss the 30-meter telescope. IMUA TMT is a Native Hawaiian-led community organization in Hawaii that is advocating in favor of building the 30-meter telescope on Mauna Kea. We believe that it is going to be an excellent project. It's going to bring tremendous benefits to our community and to our culture. And we think that keeping this conversation going is vital, even in this time of social distancing. As a brief explanation, we organized this panel with our distinguished panelists about a month ago. And as you all know, in the intervening period, a quarantine was dropped on the entire planet due to COVID-19. So now, in order to stay civically engaged and continue this conversation, but also to stay safe, we've shifted to this online format. So please take it away, Peter Apo. Peter Apo will be our moderator for today. Peter is a former Office of Hawaiian Affairs trustee out here in Hawaii. He has been involved in this fight for this discussion for longer than anybody. And so we want to make sure we get the time for Peter to moderate. Appreciate it, Peter. Mahalo for everything you've done, and take it away.
Thank you, Sam. And to all of you who are joining us today, thank you. Big mahalo for aloha mai kako. Welcome to a panel discussion regarding Mauna Kea and the 30-meter telescope. Clearly, the issue is one of the most controversial public policy challenges to shake the Hawaiian Islands since Stop the Bombing of Kaho'olawe, which happened in the mid-1970s. The Mauna Kea controversy began bubbling over in 2015, and it was triggered by rising claims of cultural injury to the Mauna. The adjudication process sent the matter to the Hawaii Supreme Court, where it was processed for 2 years, and it emerged with the court's decision to approve the project. But then the issue was subjected to a higher level of culturally injury claims about the sacredness of the mountain as a religious matter. But the second time around, the mountain suffered a virtual eruption and a whole slew of other issues began to flow down the mountain, kind of like streams of lava. And each stream was burning its own path to the sea. So today, our panelists have the really challenging job of trying to sort it all out and help us understand the full measure of all the parameters of where this is going. But let me take some time now to introduce each of our panelists. First, I'm going to start with James Mauliola Keaka Stone Jr. Kimo is a very distinguished attorney in Hawaii. He's 30 years of experience whose practice focuses upon the representation of real estate companies, trade associations, and risk management. He has written 15 certified real estate continuing education courses, over 40 real estate related training modules, and well over 100 real estate related articles covering a wide range of topics. Basically, his brain works really well. Regarding Hawaiian culture, Mr. Stone is an accomplished musician, hula practitioner who was trained by Winona Beamer and Henry Moikeha Pa. Mr. Stone has recorded 5 CDs, been nominated for 3 Nahoku Hanohano Awards, and in 2008, he won the Hoku for Album of the Year for Nalani Eha as co-producer and recording artist. Additionally, he was the president of the Hawaiian Music Hall of Fame from 2004 to 2016. That's Kimo Stone. Next, a person who may not be a stranger to most of you, Paul Brewbaker, a longtime economist, well known in Hawaii, principal of TZ Economics. He's obviously a Hawaii economics consultant. His background in research on the Hawaiian economy and financial risk analytics stems from a 25-year affiliation with Bank of Hawaii, concluding as its chief economist. He is a graduate of Stanford University, did graduate work at the University of Wisconsin, and received his PhD in economics from the University of Hawaii. He has lectured extensively in international, monetary, and financial economics. He's a member of the American Economic Association, the American Finance Association, and the National Association for Business Economics, from which he holds the Certified Business Economist designation. I would say pretty well qualified in that field. Kalepa Baybayan, born and raised in Lahaina, Kalepa Baybayan has been an active participant in the Polynesian voyaging renaissance since 1975, its inception. He served as captain and navigator on board the iconic Hawaiian double-hull voyaging canoe Hokulea, as well as the canoes Hawaiiloa and Hokualakai. In 2007, he was one of 5 Hawaiian men initiated into the Order of the Pida Po, a 3,000-year-old society of deep sea navigators by their teacher, Master Navigator Maupiailu, on the island of Satawal. Kalepa has served as Imiloa's first navigator in residence since his appointment in 2009, and he most recently participated in the 3-year famously known Malama Honua Worldwide Voyage. He returned to school late in life, graduating with a BA from Kahaka Uluoke'eli Kolani College of Hawaiian Language in 1997, and followed with a master's in education from Heritage College. Fourth, Mailani Neal. She is native Hawaiian, born and raised in Kona, Kamehameha Schools, Kapalama, a product of that institution. She holds a bachelor's degree in science, specifically in applied physics, and she's pursuing her PhD in physics and astronomy instrumentation at New Mexico Tech. She's an engineering intern on Mauna Kea at East Asian Observatory for 2 summers. Lastly, we have Bruce Heidenfeldt. Bruce is of Hawaiian descent, born and raised in the state of Hawaii. He spent 2 4-year terms as an aquatic and wildlife advisory committee member, 9 years as a Mauna Kea ranger, supervisor, and first responder for the Mauna, and 22 years with the Hawaii County Police Department. During his time as a Mauna Kea ranger, he spent a lot of time exploring the summit for ancient historical and cultural sites and documented unknown sites. His knowledge of the Mauna gave him a profound, deep respect for its significant cultural and scientific importance. He brings to the panel a vast knowledge of not only the cultural aspects of Mauna Kea, but also a huge importance to the safety risks of all who visit. So, now having completed that, thought we would, hang on a second. Wanted to, before we get to the panelists, I thought I would start the discussion. I wanted to summarize the ground that we hope to cover in today's discussion with a list of general characterizations of the issues that melted together in a confusing kaleidoscope of moving parts. And it's been hard to sort out fact from fiction. We hope these questions will help our panel frame their dialogue. Respect for Hawaiian cultural practices is part of the TMT development plan. In other words, does the 30-meter telescope development plan violate the sacredness of Mauna Kea as is being claimed? How did the practice of astronomy on Mauna Kea for the past 50 years rise so gloriously as a feather in Hawaii's cap, as a global leader in the field, to becoming a symbol of disrespect and violation of the mountain's sacredness to those protesting its continuation? We have environmental concerns. Can the claims of substantially adverse impacts on the natural resources of Mauna Kea actually be substantiated, challenging a Hawaiian Supreme Court ruling? Anti-science attacks. The panel will attempt to address the science versus culture arguments that abound and set the record straight with respect to that intersect as consistent with Hawaiian tradition and practices. Religious issues. This is a huge can of worms. How does one validate the religious claims that the sacredness of the entire mountain is violated in the absence of a priesthood, which was abolished by the kingdom in 1819? Economic concerns. The panel will dive into what's at risk in terms of economic opportunities and its multi-level ladder of benefits to every segment of the Hawaii and Native Hawaiian communities. Political arguments. There are a number of political clashes that center on the degree to which Hawaiians had a continuum of voice through each of the periods of colonization, from kingdom to republic to annexation to statehood, and challenges to the legal authority over Mauna Kea, beginning with annexation. And lastly, this one is really, some of us have actually personally witnessed these personal attacks upon Hawaiian TMT supporters. This is a sad discussion on the social media phenomenon of supporters of the TMT being in many cases viciously attacked by those who disagree. This oftentimes sadly involves Hawaiians facing off with one another. And that's something, we need to kind of straighten out and get our act together. Hawaii loa, koliki kako, all Hawaii stand together. So let's get started with a question for Kimo. Kimo, to Hawaiians, Mauna Kea is a va'o akua, the place of the gods. Isn't TMT a desecration of a sacred Hawaiian place?
No, it's not. The claim that Mauna Kea is a sacred place of the gods is modern in origin. There is no documentation in the literature that suggests that Mauna Kea is somehow particularly sacred. You can make a good argument that all of our aina, of course, is sacred, but that's just this sort of aimless relativism that doesn't get us anywhere. But there are certainly other places that to Hawaiians was far more sacred. Now, I'm struck by your hat, Peter. You are wearing a hat regarding Pu'ukohola, the last luakini, to the extent that there was a sacred element to Hawaiian religion. The practice of human sacrifice was as in terms of sacredness, as far as you could go. Where are you going to go after that? And so the context that we now have many people claiming sacred restrictions, the requirement of imposing very specific protocol in terms of access and a process up on the mountain is not grounded in fact. I grew up in Hilo. I am 63 years old. And we used to visit the mountain in the late 50s through the mid 60s before there was an access road. None of the practices now being asserted by many protesters existed until there was a road and you can get up to the summit. And then you developed all these other ceremonies. Now, let's be clear. I celebrate the right of anyone to exercise religion in their own fashion. What I object to is using that protection of the exercise of religion, not as a shield, but as a sword to prevent other access, other uses of Mauna Kea. That's just wrong. There is nothing in the TMT plan that would limit access to Mauna Kea for religious purposes. There is specific accommodations, in fact, for that. But to say that somehow TMT in and of itself desecrates the mountain is not true.
So the claim that the TMT will interfere with access to the summit for Hawaiian cultural practices, what is your response to that?
It's not true. And you can just look at the management plan for the mountain. Practitioners have access today. Practitioners, as TMT is being developed, will have access. And after TMT is built, will have access. Kalepa, in particular, has been familiar with this and has been involved with it more, at least longer than I have. And Bruce has too. So we might want to turn to them for their insights.
Yeah, in fact, Kalepa, I was going to ask you about is there a long history of astronomy on the mountain?
Actually not. For naked eye astronomy, it doesn't work real well on the top of the mountain. As far as navigational sites, they're normally constructed along the coastline, where you're at the same eye level as the ocean. So you're kind of looking at the ocean from the level of being on board a canoe. So it's not practical to have practice navigational studies, for example, up on the summit of the mountain. It's just not practical.
So are there better sites for astronomy?
Well, for traditional, if we're talking about traditional navigation sites, it's normally like Pokai Bay, the hay out on there, right? It's along the coastline. Coastline sites are a lot better suited for observing the night sky.
Okay, because one of the arguments is that whether or not it's beneficial, there is the argument about the placing the TMT on the top of the mountain. So that's always, Mailani, you with your background, I want you to weigh in on this question regarding the appropriateness of astronomy on that mountain.
So without a doubt, Mauna Kea is the best place in the world to conduct astronomy, as we know modern day astronomy to be. There's been many studies done that show that Mauna Kea is the perfect situation for astronomy. There's not too much moisture in the air. And I guess the way that it's described is there's actually a puka in the atmosphere, not a literal puka in the atmosphere, but when you think about the amount of moisture and humidity in the atmosphere, there's a puka right over Mauna Kea. And this actually leads to a lot of colder temperatures there, which is much, much better to conduct astronomy in, particularly for all the instruments used in the telescope. They don't like to be looking at close, warm objects. And so when the atmosphere is in the way, that is very inconvenient. And so these studies have shown that Mauna Kea is the best place in the world to do astronomy. I believe that I believe the number given is 3. If TMT is moved to another site, it will take 3 times as long to conduct the science at that site than it would to conduct on Mauna Kea.
Okay, Bruce, I want to get you in on this question regarding the location, Mauna Kea, and what some of the information that you have says about that site.
Well, when I was a ranger, and for like almost a decade, and I watched the scientists, and they went down there and they drilled like for months, and I noticed the area of the land that they drilled and dug, and they found nothing. There was no caves. There was no EV. There's nothing. It was barren. Is a barren site. So the whole site is completely. I mean, there was nothing, absolutely nothing. So I feel personally that's the best site for TMT right there, that spot.
You know, and let me turn to Kimo. I recall, and this relates to the site question. All right. So I recall in 2015 there were two cultural injury claims that were pretty broad based. One, that any digging into the mountain constituted a cultural injury. Second, and even more kind of astounding, was any intrusion in the air column directly above the mountain was also a cultural injury. That particular cultural injury claim, I believe, some people believe was an attempt because the TMT was 18 stories high, and at the time was intended to be located on top of the mountain. But then that changed out of TMT's respect for that viewpoint. So they moved the site down to the side of the mountain. Can you weigh in on that whole scenario that went down?
Well, there are two aspects to your question. The first in terms of any digging or drilling or any disturbance of the mountain for the purposes of development. To the extent that there was any digging, the first ones to do that were Hawaiians. The best ko'i mine, where we would get the material for our as, the best is on Mauna Kea. So if you go there now, just to the left of Poliahu, which is a pu'ua near the summit, is the quarry for various ko'i that Hawaiians used to mine that material. In response to concerns that some practitioners had about the use of the summit, TMT was moved. It's 500 feet lower in a valley, and
That's
it
correct.
cannot be seen from the summit. It is positioned in such a way that it doesn't block the view of the rising sun or the setting sun, which is considered by some practitioners as important. Doesn't block the view of Haleakala. It doesn't interfere with any of the practices or ceremonies that practitioners wish to conduct, which, by the way, as we discussed earlier, are modern in origin. There is no direct connection to the traditional practices now being asserted by a number of protesters. That is post-access road, and certainly is not consistent with the destruction of the kapu system by King Liholiho. That matter of whether the Hawaiian religion had any further control or jurisdiction over the people was settled in 1819 when Liholiho sat down and ate with his mother Keopulani and his regent Kaumanu, and later settled it on the battlefield when Liholiho defeated Kekuakalani at the Battle of Kuamo'o. So since 1819, it was Hawaiians who overthrew what they perceived at that time as shackles, the burdens of the ancient religion. Doesn't mean we don't respect people's beliefs, but that's different from saying that somehow has jurisdiction or control over what we can or cannot do on Mauna Kea.
Yeah, that battle was particularly interesting because it was not well known, even among Hawaiians, that there was a period in history where there was actually an official act of the kingdom that began to run back, over the religion at the time and the worship system, and then of course in the doing away with the priesthood that ruled over all cultural injury claims and all of that. In their absence, a whole different set of circumstances took place. But I think the fact that most Hawaiians, which included me, I felt so ignorant. It was only 4 or 5 years ago when they were trying to raise money to purchase the site of the Battle of Kuamo'o, that I actually got the information, and I was like totally stunned, So, we'll come back to some of the cultural controversies going on. But I want to turn to Paul right now and begin talking a little bit about the economics and what some of the benefits of the benefits, if there are downsides, which I can't think of any. What is the economic benefit of TMT?
Well, the benefits come in three packages. One is, of course, the capital formation itself, building the telescope and establishing the facility that will support it over the years. The second comes over time as astronomers and others are engaged in using the capability of the telescope to conduct their research. And the third comes in the knowledge formation, contribution to humanity as in its entirety. It's non-rival in consumption, like consumption doesn't preclude you from using it, and it's non-excludable. Once we know what we've discovered, we can apply that to advance our thinking about the cosmos and the universe. So those three things have different values, economic values. So the first one, obviously, is a big bunch of money, a couple billion maybe to build it. Most of it probably just the equipment itself, because it's so highly specialized. The second is really important because that's the ongoing contribution to the economies of this particular community of scientists and professionals, support personnel, and then the network that they create of literally integrating themselves in through business inter-industry linkages through and into the community in their support for science education in the schools or community community groups that are either engaged in science and technology, engineering kinds of activities, or cultural practitioners that are also supported by the presence of this activity, which of course has been in place for a half century. We're talking about augmenting that. And then I don't even know how to put a value on the benefits from the knowledge that we gain. But I think there's an
Paul,
interesting
sorry
parallel.
to interrupt you. Could you possibly hold your mic up?
I'm so sorry. I was
There you go.
supposed to do that
Perfect.
earlier and I'd forgotten. I think probably the most important part of this, and if we wanted to hang some numbers on it, a couple billion up front, I don't know, 40 million a year. What's the present value of 40 million or 50 million a year? You know, into infinity, discounted at 2%. These are math problems. Ask your children to solve them. But probably the biggest nugget is this idea that we've advanced knowledge where we go as where the planet is able to go, where humanity is able to go as a consequence, is almost impossible to value. But I'll give you an analogy. What is it worth to us today that Polynesian voyagers and explorers were able to venture out into the unknown and ultimately to discover the Hawaiian Islands and leave as their legacy what we have here today? That's the kind of thing we're talking about. This is how we explore in our time. These are our voyages of discovery in and through the space-time continuum.
Awesome. Mailani, I wanted you to jump in on this. Obviously, one of the economic benefits is the opportunities it creates for jobs, and particularly in the field of science, where Hawaii is lagging way behind, and trying to offset our #1 industry, tourism, with other kinds of occupations that have high value and pay really good salaries. So from an economic perspective, what does that look like with respect to physics and other areas of science?
So first, I want to actually tag on a little bit to what Paul said about really how invaluable it is, the discoveries that will be made. Kalepa is familiar with a program called, I believe it's Ahua Heinoa. And so many people are aware that we were able, not we, but as humans, we were able to take an image of a black hole for the first time ever. And that black hole was given a Hawaiian name. Its name is Povehi. Let's see, I believe a couple years ago, we had the first detected interstellar object come across our solar system. And it was also given a Hawaiian name, Oumuamua. And so, you know, this is a way that we are able to elevate the Hawaiian culture by being able to discover and name objects with Hawaiian names. And those names are now going to be written down in history forever. And so I find it absolutely incredible that, you know, this is what we're doing with the Hawaiian language as modern day scientists. And so, yes, it's absolutely invaluable. There's no way we can put a huge number on how incredible it is that these discoveries are being named Hawaiian names. The telescope that I used to work at, they recently received a new instrument, and it was also given a Hawaiian name. It was named after, it actually has 3 different frequencies that it detects at, and so it was given the name of 3 different fishes that are able to see at different wavelengths of light. And so I think that this continuity that we're forming with the discoveries being made in astronomy and the Hawaiian language is absolutely astounding. And so to return to your question, TMT is donating so much money for students of the Big Island. This will be donated to schools and teachers to help them produce and conduct their own STEM programs. And personally, I have been a benefactor of scholarships that TMT has afforded through the Think Fund. And this is really just immensely helpful for a Native Hawaiian who is pursuing a degree at a college. I mean, college is so difficult to pay for in this country. And so to have this economic source to help pay for college is incredible. And, you know, it's my plan to come home and work here the moment that I'm done with schooling. And so we will see that in many other students from here on out with economic opportunities provided by TMT for Big Island students.
Mailani raises a really important point that new industry in the 21st century, in a place as geographically isolated and remote as is Hawaii, are most likely to be knowledge-based industries. And the science-based industries that we've seen form, in this case, from the early statehood period, Governor Burns and the Bagazo back there in the 1960s recognized this opportunity and now have created over the generations opportunities for scholars like Mailani and people like myself who had an opportunity to go off to college to come home to Hawaii and apply our skills in professions that wouldn't have existed in the absence of these investments in science-based industry. This is where Hawaii's economy can make a global contribution. And then we can go down to Costco and buy all the stuff that's made by other people.
And you know, Peter, we have to see the night sky as a resource, you know, as an exportable resource. You know, we don't have minerals where we can manufacture stuff. We're not a manufacturing-based economy. Our economy is based upon our location, right? Tourism, the weather, military. But the night sky is an exportable resource that we can use to help gain a foothold on the benefiting Hawaii's community.
Location.
Yeah.
You know,
Peter.
it's so interesting that our number one, number 2 industries, tourism and the military, right, are based on location. And here comes Mauna Kea. It's the third.
Peter, one of the things I was struck by when I was listening to Paul and Mailani and Kalepa is that we are meeting remotely on YouTube because the coronavirus has shut down regular and normal opportunities and commerce. I saw an estimate today that in the hospitality industry, they could expect something in the order of an 80% loss of their revenues. Now, Paul can jump in and maybe comment on that, but if it comes even close to that, it makes us so vulnerable to have one of the shining examples of how in Hawaii we have an opportunity for excellence being rejected by people who give no alternative. There is no one else there who is currently protesting against the telescope that can fill in the $2.4 billion gap that will be created by their actions. If this is successful, if the effort to obstruct the telescope is successful, these same people will go back to doing what they were doing before, and it will have no benefit at all.
Yep.
It is a tragedy.
Yep.
Bruce?
So very quickly,
go ahead, Mailani.
sorry, we do have a question from our listeners. So someone has asked, since TMT and the telescopes give so much to schools, students, teachers, and the academic community, why aren't more of these beneficiaries speaking out in support? I think, for one thing, I think that people are probably afraid to speak out in support now, which is what we will be talking about later. I think also another reason is, I guess we think that, you know, we're living in a modern day where there's social media and there's so many voices being projected. But, you know, it's still difficult sometimes to discuss. Like, all of us here today are lucky that we have organized this discussion panel to speak our thoughts and our opinions and beliefs. But for people, you know, perhaps the teacher at the elementary school doesn't have the same platform as any of us to speak their support and, I guess, acknowledge that they have been benefited by TMT already. That would just be my assumption.
And Peter, this is Kimo.
Yes.
It's also not true. It's not true that people who support TMT are not speaking up. Mailani is on our panel. Makana Silva, a doctoral candidate in Ohio, speaks at every opportunity he has. Kupono Trent, another doctoral candidate, speaks up at every occasion he has. Heather Kaluna, an astrophysicist on Hawaii Island, speaks up in every opportunity that she has. Paul Coleman, the first native Hawaiian to earn a PhD in astrophysics, who unfortunately passed away last year,
Yes.
had a dream. And his dream was that every scientist on the mountain would be Hawaiian, and that we would be able to fill the ranks of astronomers with Hawaiian scientists. Now, that's a vision and a dream that's worth supporting. I say mai maka'u, which means don't fear. I know we have been attacked personally. I've been the target of personal attacks. Mailani has been the target, but they have no idea how hard it is to achieve in the field of astronomy. And it's even harder for a native. When they protest against TMT, they're protesting against Mailani, Makana, and Kupono.
I think a part of the optic that most Hawaiians are opposed to the TMT is probably created by a little bit of a media bias in terms of what sells newspapers and what sells magazines and what sells stories. And clearly, you know, the supporters are kind of on the losing side of that publishing battle, where it's much more dramatic, you know, to have a picture of a few hundred protesters on the mountain blocking roads with upside down flags than it is for someone trying to be rational.
But Peter, isn't it also a matter of access? Because many of us have jobs. Many of us have a life and we are engaged in those livelihoods. If you are sitting on the bottom of the mountain, you're easy to get to. But where is Mailani right now? She's working on her doctorate. I have a practice. Kalepa teaches. Mr. Brewbaker is an economist of some notes. So that's another reason. I mean, if that's all you do in your life is talk to the media, then you're going to have, chances are, more opportunities. Most of us don't.
That's a really
Peter, I'm going to try out a new mic. Can you hear me now?
I hear you. Yes.
I think this point about the media is really important. There's the old structural bias: if it bleeds, it leads. So, you know, but I think it goes beyond that. I have to say the Star Advertiser, we only have one newspaper in town. They do seem obsessed with the coverage of the protests and devoid of any of the content that we've just been talking about. What's, you know, occasionally there's a mention of a black hole. Whoa, there, one just flew by me. But you don't hear the sheer numbers of persons that the earlier question asked about, students and teachers and people in the academic community, in many cases, because they may be benefiting from not just the material contributions that the industry is making, that astronomy is making in support for scholarships and whatnot, but simply in the presence, right? The scientific community is a network that exists through which just like any network, just like any social network, these relationships support and enhance the character, in this case, of science education. I'm not involved in science education, but I do engage with the people that are involved in the industry and work with them and benefit as a consequence of that. I'd also say, you are talking about nerds. Like, we don't actually show up at the protests. We're too busy solving problems. But at the end of the day, I think this deeper issue of how the economy evolves, what are we likely to do successfully in the future in the global economy to make a contribution? You know, we're not going to manufacture stuff. We stopped growing sugar cane on the Big Island 30 years ago. So you need to get over it if you're thinking we're going to go back to that kind of economic activity as the leading model. And that's a way to impoverish people. That's a way to immiserate the economy and the population of a place like the Big Island that doesn't have, you know, Big Island has tourism as an export, and then look what happened when the volcano went off. It doesn't have a second, it just has these other small things that are going on that add up. And that's kind of the way we'll get there. Mailani talked about, well, I'll tell you a story. I was asked years ago to write a chapter in the geography of Hawaii, published by Hilo professors. And they said, think maps. These were geographers. And the thing that I focused on was this idea that Hawaii needs to transcend its geographic remoteness and isolation. We're doing it today with this technology. And tourism did it with, you know, commercial passenger aviation. And knowledge transfer is the other way we can do that in Hawaii. Creating the knowledge and sharing it with the rest of the world. That's what this is about.
I want to turn to Bruce.
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about the environmental impacts that not only with the TMT that would occur, but in terms of your history as a ranger. Is it? For instance, question. I heard that TMT will contaminate the Hawaii Island aquifer. Is this true?
No, sir, not at all. That won't happen. That will never happen. Not at all. Well, let me tell you this. That's an old talking point from way back when. Yeah. It will not contaminate the ground. The water will release toxic chemicals. This is not true. According to the IES, it will not contaminate the groundwater contamination or harm marine plants, animals, or release toxic materials. it will never ever do that. Okay, because even their sewer is pumped up by B&B pumping. Gemini does it, Canada Friend does it, Keck does it, Subaru does it. So there's no ground contamination into, it's all pumped up. So I don't know where they get their information from. To me, it's all hearsay among themselves. I talked to one protester down at a site many years ago, and he told me that at one time they were leaking out mercury. So I said, who told you this? He said, oh, I used to work for Keck. And I said, oh, when? Oh, 10 years ago. I said, that's impossible because I worked here like 10 years and Keck never did leak out mercury. I never ever heard them leak out mercury. And I know he was lying to me, and he just wanted to say something or to create something, just to make me think that they were doing a bad thing, which they weren't. So no, there's no contamination in the soil whatsoever. Yeah.
And in general, in
Yes.
your experience, as a ranger, and a
Yes.
lot of your responsibility had to be with the total management of the mountain,
That's correct.
on the law.
Uh-huh.
So forget the TMT as a freestanding issue,
Uh-huh.
but looking at the question of the appropriateness of astronomy on
Uh-huh.
that mountain and the history of astronomy that's been on the mountain. There seems to be, part of the protesters are protesting the activity itself. Now, some of it is based on, a use of land, environmental concerns, the footprint
Uh-huh.
is too big, whatever. What was your experience as you watched, over your years, the footprint grow and the activity, and uh, is that something that we need to pay more attention to?
Well, it varies because you got the violent ones, and you got the kapuna. The violent ones are to me, are the younger ones. And it's very hard for the police because the police, you got family, and I understand their point of view with the young ones and the kapuna. Even DLNR, they got family in there too, and it's hard because I got family in there too. So as a ranger, we just do our job diligently. We are told what to do, and we just do our job. That's all we can do. You
Yeah.
know, and we cannot arrest the people. We have no power of arrest. We have no power. All we can do, we can just block the road, or you tell them, no, you can't come up. I'm sorry. That's it. And then if they come up and they pursue us, we just call the police, and they come up and they take care of the problem.
Got it.
Yeah.
Kimo, let me throw one at you. This has to do with, again, having to do with lasers. The claim that there are lasers being emitted, and that it is subjecting folks to radiation, the negative effects of radiation.
Right. Well, as an attorney, we use lasers often. No, Mailani would be in a better position to answer this. I only know this sort of remotely, but I did want to follow up on a point you asked about earlier, Peter, and that was about the environmental issues.
Yes.
The reason why we can now be so certain that the operations on the mountain are a closed system from an environmental point of view is that that particular issue was amongst the dozens of issues. But that particular issue was the subject of over a decade of litigation. It went to hearing, it went to appeal, then went back to a hearing, and Judge Amano, over 44 days, heard 71 witnesses. And amongst the topics that was covered in the contested hearing case was the environmental impact of development of TMT on the mountain. And the Supreme Court in 2018 reviewed the contested case hearing and came to the conclusion that there would be no substantial adverse impact to existing natural resources within the surrounding area amongst the telescopes and TMT in particular. So it's not just a matter of our anecdotal experiences. You know, Bruce is up there and he has actual experience up there. But even if you didn't rely on anyone who had a job on the mountain, all of those issues had to be addressed in the litigation by experts in the field, and it had to stand the test of proof, which was then affirmed by the Supreme Court. So that's why it's an old talking point and no longer valid. We went through this for 11 years.
Goodness, thank you. Kalepa,
Yo.
religious issues.
Okay.
Doesn't TMT interfere with the rights of Native Hawaiians to practice their religion?
Well, TMT is not going to interfere with anybody because TMT can't do anything about it, right? Everyone or any person is welcome to practice their religious belief, whatever that belief may be. But if I can elaborate on the question you started off asking Kimo on the idea of sacred, right?
Yes.
I mean, people call Mauna Kea sacred. As a native Hawaiian, I don't define Mauna Kea as sacred, and that goes to what the definition of sacred means on all definition platforms. When you look up the word sacred, it has to do with a religious relationship. It has to do with a relationship of worshiping God or gods. What I characterize Mauna Kea for me is that it's a spiritual environment. It's about what moves the human spirit. That's what spirituality means. It's about what moves the human spirit. And the reason why I don't characterize it as being sacred is, going back to what Kimo alluded to, in 1819, we overthrew the kapu system, that very restrictive religious system that governed the daily lives of Hawaiians. And we did that through an act called Ainoa, free eating, right? Because the kapu system restricted women from eating with men. It was the basis of their religious philosophy. And once men partook meals with women, it basically abolished the kapu system. And it was a group of Hawaiians. It wasn't just one Hawaiian making up. It was a number of Hawaiians that Hawaiian leaders, Ka'ahumanu, Keopulani, the high priest Heva Heva, Leo Leo, Kalani Moku, got together and decided that the religion had to be abolished if Hawaiians was going to be recognized as being part of a more global community. So I won't characterize Mauna Kea as being sacred, because I don't want to act contrary to the will and wisdom of our esteemed elite. And that's why I choose to call Mauna Kea a spiritual environment versus a sacred one.
This is an interesting aspect of the issue, the difference between spiritual, sacred, and what is traditional and customary. So in 2015, as I recall, the claim was really in trying to be founded under federal law, state law, that dealt with traditional and customary Native practices. That doesn't mean that places are not special. They are special. We have a whole body of law, national, and that Mauna Kea especially, that there are spaces on Mauna Kea that are spiritual and that do deserve protection and deserve respect. And that is part of a whole management program that Bruce is involved in helping protect those sites. It's a different thing when you elevate what is traditional and customary, and even going beyond spiritual and start claiming, making sacred claims, because that moves into a whole nother area of public policy that has to do with religion. And the religious, so now it raises one of those tributaries that come down the mountain is separation of church and state. That the sacred claim, which is made, which means basically no discussion, right? It's sacred, we can't discuss it. So there's a kind of an impasse at that. Kim, you have any feelings about that part of it? You know, where the sacred claims inappropriate?
Well, my thought with regards to the claim of sacredness, I think, Peter, you hit the nail on the head, because the concept of sacredness is being used as something of a bludgeon to force people to accept a particular point of view. In America, in the state of Hawaii, everyone has a right to their own beliefs, but that does not give them the right to deny others either access or use of the mountain. So first, the current so-called protocols asserted by protesters are modern in origin. There is no historic evidence of cultural protocols controlling access to the mountain. Two, as Kalepa said, we are Ainoa. The kapu is broken, and it was thrown down by Hawaiians themselves. And I, like Kalepa, will not second guess my mo'i, my ali'i, and the high priest Hefa, when they looked at that, their circumstances, and they came to the conclusion that kapu was no longer viable and proclaimed Ainoa. And then third, even without a historical basis for protocols, no one is stopping practitioners from conducting their ceremonies on the mountain. UH has specifically acknowledged the right of any Hawaiian who wishes to conduct ceremonies to worship their gods in whatever manner they desire. So it is really something of a red herring. I think you're absolutely right, Peter. The use of the word sacred is really intended to end the conversation.
Mailani, got any thoughts about that?
I do have a question that I think Kimo would be able to answer. So a lot of people claim that TMT cannot begin construction because the road, the access road, is on Hawaiian homelands. Are you able to clarify on that at all?
Well, in short, I didn't, or actually don't have to clarify it, because the Hawaii Supreme Court has. The Hawaii Supreme Court has affirmed the conditional use permit for the development of TMT on the mountain. And so it's sort of odd that we are even having this conversation, as if 11 years of litigation didn't take place, as if there weren't two contested case hearings, the first which went up to appeal. Now, let's recall when the protesters were successful in getting the initial permit sent back down for a full-blown hearing, that was celebrated by anti-telescope protesters as a tremendous victory. And then after having the opportunity for the contested case hearing, and then the Supreme Court affirming the right to construct and permits are being valid, now they conveniently disregard the Hawaii Supreme Court. So it's that sort of duplicitous hypocrisy of supporting decisions that you like and ignoring the ones that you don't, that I personally don't have patience for. I mean, if you're going to claim legal right, then you stand by that, win or lose. And if I took this case up to the Supreme Court and they ruled against me, I would not be interfering with the lives of thousands of us who might otherwise benefit from the mountain. That is just wrong. Any way you look at it, that's just wrong.
You know, some of the, go ahead.
Well, Peter, I was going to say, if I could just pick up on this thread as well, this issue of, you know, process and legitimacy of government institutions and so on, and the problem we as a society have with that. That, you know, our generation, I don't know, I'm a child of the 50s and 60s, worked hard in the courses of our adult lives participating in governance and whatnot to try to redefine those institutions and secure them in the confidence of the public. I was part of a process personally, like 30 years ago or so, after the Pash decision. You remember that one? where public access shoreline Hawaii, where the question had in part of the process involving implementation. So after the court ruled that customary and traditional practices were legitimate and should be accommodated, the process was developed by which rules can be adopted. People who are involved in planning and government planning and whatnot can incorporate those so developers know what the rules of the game are. This kind of thing has been going on for decades and decades. I understand that the particular process we're talking about has involved, going back to the Supreme Court, as Kimo says, a couple times, to re-answer or to clarify answers. Or we need to have some faith in the process. Understand that it's because of our concern for stewardship of our natural resources that people like Bruce and the DLNR are engaged in stewardship activities to mitigate environmental concerns. It's because of the process that Kimo describes, the legal process we have, that we can be reassured that different voices are being taken into account. It's because of the process that we work so hard to develop that this nuance that Kalepa was talking about between spiritual considerations, which we all share of one sort or another, and more formal religious issues, which in this country we've decided in order for everybody to be able to pursue their individual religious beliefs, we have to allow for them to have some separation from government. So all these things sort of come into play here. Kimo's right, a lot of it's being used, as a tool of coercion, but I think we've got the right process. It's complicated by social media, which, it tends to elevate certain kinds of voices rather than others. But I think we have the right process in place. I think we have an opportunity to have a good outcome. And in particular, one that, because it's so intent on taking into account things we might have left out in the past, is going to come up with a better result. So have a little faith. That's what I would say.
Okay, Mailani, let me direct this question to you. From time to time, the notion that the telescope community, that is those who are on the Mauna, are disrespectful or disregard Hawaiians, the protocols, they don't act with the proper protocols regarding visiting or using the mountain, etc. Did you have any experience in that that would allow you to address that claim?
For one thing, I could say that the astronomers here really truly love this place. All of them, or many of them that I've known, they've come here originally only planning to stay for a year or two and end up staying here forever. And so for people to come to this island, especially in astronomy, and know how special it is very it speaks very loudly to me. All the astronomers that I've known have really taken it upon themselves to become immersed in our communities. A lot of the astronomers are part of paddling teams, and some of them have even joined hula heiaus and halaus. And for them to be willing to learn our culture, and I've had some astronomers that I've spoke with, they asked me about the language. I think it's very, very incorrect to think that the astronomers here do not respect the Hawaiians. I think that they actually really appreciate how we've made this place incredible. And as far as their conduct on the mountain is, they're very respectful. They take very great lengths of precautions to ensure that they are acting respectfully, that they are not damaging the Aina, and that they have the correct intentions of what their jobs are. And so I will say that I think that anyone who thinks the astronomers here are disrespectful of Hawaiians simply do not understand a different mindset.
You know, it's the first time as far as I know, that someone's given an answer that was personally involved in that, and I'm glad to hear that, because that had some credibility among a lot of people, simply because there's no communication. You know, they're way up there, and everybody else is down here. So thank you for that.
Well, Peter,
Yeah.
this is Kimo. I was up on the mountain last month, and I met, I think, 8 or 9 astronomers and support staff. 5 of the guys I met were Hawaiian from Keaka. And so there's sort of this false distinction that the guys up there are not Hawaiian. The number 2 administrator for Keck is Mike Aina from Keaka. And so despite all the obstacles that we face as a people, which, by the way, let's be honest, the real issues facing us as Hawaiians are healthcare, housing, incarceration. Notwithstanding those formidable issues, most of the guys up there putting snow chains on the trucks, doing the administrative side, and some of them practicing science were actually Hawaiian. And the non-Hawaiians are also trained in Hawaiian traditions and culture as part of their tenure up on the mountain by the Office of Mauna Kea Management. And Wally Ishibashi, again, homesteader from Keaukaha, is the senior cultural advisor. And Bruce knows Wally well, and those sorts of efforts. So if people make that claim, it's because they don't know.
So there's actually strident communication going on between a segment of Native Hawaiians and the astronomers. There's kind of a mix in there. That's interesting. I didn't know that.
Neither did I. That's why I'm glad I went there, and I am struck by you don't hear those voices because they're busy working. they're plowing the snow from the road. They're doing stuff.
That's a funny picture. Hawaiian plowing snow from the road. Kalepa, our ancestors would have opposed astronomy on the mountain. True or false?
False.
Why?
Just historically, right? Our Hawaiians, our engagement with astronomy goes back to the arrival of Captain Cook. Captain Cook in 1779, as a scientific mission, his vessels had portable observatories. So whenever they made landfall, they would set these portable observatories up on land. And when they arrived in Kealakekua Bay, they requested the local chief, who was the son of Kalaniʻopuʻu, because Kalaniʻopuʻu was in Kealakekua Bay at the time. And he went to the priest of Hikiau, and the priest of Hikiau insisted that Captain Cook erect his observatories within the boundaries of the Hikiau complex grounds. So they had it right adjacent to the Hikiau. And so, the question of whether they, if the priests condone that observatories be erected right next to the Hikiau, what does that do to your argument of desecration? Clearly, the priest didn't see it as a desecration. And in the 1790s, when Captain Vancouver came back to Hawaii another 3 times, on his 4th visit there, the 4th time he was going to go use the same site, he was denied access by the site by a woman who was the wife of the former high priest. And so Kamehameha asked Vancouver if he could erect the observatory in another location, and Vancouver said no. So Kamehameha went to the high priest, presented the problem, but it was the high priest jurisdiction, right? Because it's their property, and they insisted that Captain Vancouver continue to erect the observatories there. So here in the early 1790s, right, we have an example of the highest ranking chief, the Mo'i, Kamehameha, taking the side of science, and you have the example of the priestly order siding with the telescopes being put up next to the Heiau complex grounds, which again denies the claim that they ever saw science or astronomy as a desecration.
Let me ask this. Nalama Kukui is somewhere in there. What I'm trying to do is trigger a discussion on the Hawaiian, in my opinion, Hawaiians' commitment to a search for knowledge, that when I grew up seemed to pretty much trump everything, you know, at least in my family. So any one of you, you know, maybe Mailani, I will start with you. With respect to the concept of search for knowledge within the context of TMT and what that might mean.
So I was very fortunate to have attended Kamehameha schools for 5 years. And really all of my cultural experiences, when I reflect on those, led to seeking more knowledge, but not just seeking this knowledge for the sake of knowing, but seeking this knowledge so that we can utilize this knowledge to exist in this world. We can exist respectfully with the land and the ocean. And I believe that TMT is an example of a way to respectfully seek knowledge and use that knowledge to better our people and better the whole world, really.
So and this is for anyone, the search for knowledge, did that not in fact engage Hawaiians, particularly with how they manage their natural resources, like the mountains, like the ocean, with respect to the search for knowledge being what creates quality of life, you know, on that. Any comments on that?
All right, I'll go. So I like to think about our lo'i from the times that I've been able to go and work in the lo'i. I've always observed how conservative it is of the land's resources. All of the lo'i are constructed so that water is diverted from the mainstream through the various terraces and then returned back to the original stream. Even with kalo, we see that all parts of the kalo can be used. No part of it is wasted. And it's not something simple to think of. It most definitely took very progressive and forward-thinking thought to come up with a system like this. And it can be very much thought of to be futuristic and complex. And this is what always astounds me about our ancestors, that they were able to be so thoughtful and act on their thoughts, on the knowledge that they gained to really just reap all the benefits while being respectful and responsible stewards.
Like fish ponds, what an amazing, amazing accomplishment. Okay, Paul, I'm gonna come back to you now. Let's talk about moving forward in terms of the economics. We move forward. TMT is constructed, and the industry is engaged. What comes to your mind in terms of painting a picture of how that, for Big Island economy, what are the different manifestations of having TMT there combined with the other telescopes? What would that mean for a Big Island future with respect to the economy?
It's important to understand that we're at a moment 2 centuries out, not just from the discovery or the European arrival discovery by ignorant Europeans of the Hawaiian Islands. I mean, the arrival of Cook and Vancouver have already been talked about. The political and social and economic upheaval that occurred as a result of that, the clash of cultures at that time. We're also 200 years out from the start of the Industrial Revolution. And it's been a period, 2 centuries of human history in which living standards have risen. And, but in many cases, we've sort of exhausted our ability to exploit the nature of the technological progress that came with that revolution. And we've embarked in the 21st century on a new period in which knowledge-based industry, more services and information-oriented economy is, for Hawaii, the most likely economic path into the future, because global connectivity, the miracles of global logistics and supply chains, which right now are under a little bit of stress, to be sure, means that the production of things largely occurs in other places. And so we contribute, and therefore, because of the higher incomes that result from our specialization in these other activities, we are able to have access to those things we can't produce as efficiently, as long as we can pursue these activities, which, as I say, increasingly are more knowledge-based. Now, the bridge from a goods producing economy to where we are now in Hawaii, the bridge of the last half century was tourism. But you mentioned the Big Island specifically, but this is really true on all islands. We've reached a point where tourism volumes are growing, and the impact associated with more people is becoming more challenging and probably hasn't been managed particularly well. So congestion and environmental degradation are the 2 things that seem to have the most substantive consequence for people as they look at tourism. The growth of the volume of tourism hasn't been matched by growth in tourism receipts. So the actual export revenue we make, if you adjust for inflation, hasn't really changed in 30 years. And so and people talk about the over-tourism problem. That's what I'm talking about. People on the Big Island concerned that having maxed out the capacity, there haven't been new resorts built on the Big Island for 30 years. All of the growth in the inventory on the neighbor islands for the last quarter century, lodging inventory, has been undocumented vacation rentals. And we're not so sure what we think of that either. So we're in this historic moment where, because of the sort of reaching the end of harvesting the low-hanging fruit of our principal export tourism and moving into a period where the nature of technological progress and productivity growth has changed and become much more knowledge formation oriented, we, in order to succeed in Hawaii, have to embrace that frontier, this science and technology, engineering, math-based frontier of future productivity growth. That's not going to come from building more efficient sugar mills. It's going to come from enriching an institution like Hilo and its integration with the astronomy community, and expansion, if possible, to include even greater capacity for knowledge formation, greater capacity to teach our children and train our young scientists to be a participant. That's what's at stake right now. There aren't a bunch of other things on that list of opportunity for Hawaii.
Let me ask this. If what you say is true, and maybe I don't run in the right circles, but why doesn't Hawaii's industries, not just the ones that would benefit, banks, financial institutions, why would they not be a little bit more forward in terms of supporting the TMT? I mean, the silence is deafening.
Well, I was only in the commercial banking industry for 25 years, so I'm not sure I can really speak to it. But look, I got in trouble as a commercial bank economist for sticking my neck out from time to time and saying what I actually thought about things. And it's a thing about corporate culture that it's very challenging for them. They have diverse investors. They have a diverse client base. It's really important for their sustainability as institutions. Not to rock the boat too much. And then, of course, there's a political context. Regimes change, and they're trying to get along with everybody, and so nobody wants to burn any bridges with anybody in particular. I'm not sure. This is a common complaint one hears, that the Chamber of Commerce just doesn't step up, that Bishop Street, if you know the geography of downtown Honolulu, just doesn't show up. I mean, where are the unions? What happened with the nonprofit? I mean, it's a common complaint. And the voices that you do hear are the ones that are most vociferously engaged in things that they feel passionately about, and that's understandable. And the vast majority of people in Hawaii in general, but certainly the corporations that to which you allude, who are stakeholders of a very particular kind, they have lots to lose for being on the wrong side of something. The majority of people in Hawaii just go to work and want to get along and don't really see how this is different from anything else we've been doing. I think most people would agree that if we manage it appropriately, if we manage the adverse impacts of tourism, for example, if we could figure out how to manage the congestion, or figure out how to manage the stresses on the natural resource endowment, then we can continue to do some of those things and add these new ones that maybe don't have as harsh a footprint on the national endowment or the cultural endowment. But I honestly couldn't tell you why. I don't know.
I haven't thought about it a lot, but it occurs to me that they probably very heavily depend on the government to deal with those controversial issues, and like you say, stay neutral.
Well, it is a democracy, and we do have a form of government that allows voices to be heard. It doesn't surprise me. In a lot of the work that I do, you hear voices of concern loudly, and more often than not, raising issues that need to be dealt with. At the same time, the majority of voices that aren't concerned are happy if you deal with the problems. That's we all just have to go do what we're doing. If we can't be engaged in everybody else's working out their problems. But if we have a process in which we can place some faith, we can be assured that most of those problems will be worked out. I think that's how most people view this. And 3/4 of the population, or whatever ridiculous share it is, that thinks that TMT should be built, just kind of can't be bothered by it.
Yeah,
Peter, isn't the question really a matter of leadership? See, the bank's job is to get the highest return for our shareholders. My job as an attorney is to make sure that our clients' our interests are served. Kalepa's job as a educator is to pass on the knowledge to his students. It is the job of our leadership, particularly at the state level, the governor in particular, to actually articulate a vision, a goal, and a plan to achieve it. In the vacuum of that leadership, you see as a result, sort of a one-sided, loud echo chamber of protests. Second, I think Paul is exactly right. Most people are just trying to live their lives. Not everyone is a political warrior. I remember in our day, Peter, and you're a part of it, PKO. I come from movement politics. I was holding hands on the highway at Waihole Waikane. I was protesting the Chinatown evictions. I recognize movement politics when I see it. The protesters are engaged in movement politics. They're not interested in compromise and finding solutions and accommodation. They are about winning and the other side losing. This isn't a civil conversation for them. It's win or lose. For us as Hawaiians, the question comes up all the time. Why don't I hear more from Hawaiians? Or scientists in the mainland believe that Hawaiians, native Hawaiians, are against the telescope. And that's because protesters make the effort to go reach out to them, go visit them. And for a period of time, they were doing so monthly, and they got their message out. Now, I don't blame them. They're doing their job. They are getting their message out. With the lack of leadership at the state level, without the lack, with a particular lack of leadership at the TMT level, where they have simply just bought into a false narrative of sacredness and protocol and all this other kind of stuff, you have the result that you have now, which is basically an impasse. And so until you have the leadership vacuum filled, until you have TMT with a full palette of actual evidence, fact-based information, I don't see movement.
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head. The leadership ladder is very confusing. There are a number of jurisdictions. There doesn't seem to be a center of gravity, in terms of someone stepping up that has not just the skill set, but the relationships necessary to actually bring some sense and order to decision making and moving forward. We've got about maybe less than 15 minutes. What I'd like to do is offer each of you an opportunity for an aloha statement, or express some concerns that maybe we haven't covered today. Can begin with you, Paul.
Well, this is Hawaii's future. There's not a long list of things that we can do, and this is on it. We've been doing this for 50 years. I think we've been doing it responsibly. I think we've been doing it with sensitivity to the native culture. I'm not a native Hawaiian, so I'm not going to be the one who speaks on that issue, but it's embraced by all the people of Hawaii, the importance of that to the modern culture of Hawaii. So when I listen to some of the protests, I have to say I'm mystified. It doesn't seem representative. And as I say, I think it's really important for the future of the Big Island, for the future of Hawaii's economy in general, that we understand that this is our path, that there isn't really another one.
Thank you. Mailani?
So I've been speaking on behalf of supporting TMT for about 5 years now. And, I just ask that people can try to see this vision that we hold for the future. I ask that people can see that I am representing what I hope to see in the future of the Big Island and the state and for the people. I truly believe that this project, the 30-meter telescope, will be beneficial for many generations to come, like beyond my kids and my grandkids and their kids, that this is much bigger than just the bubble that we're living our lives in right now. We need to invest in this project because it will benefit for many generations to come in a way that is respectful and will uplift our culture. Throughout history, there's been many civilizations that have come and gone, and that is the last thing that we want to see as Native Hawaiians. And we have the ability to make our culture really immortal. And this, taking opportunities like the 30-meter telescope, is what is going to elevate us as a people.
Thank you. Bruce?
Hello, Kako. My name is Bruce Heidenfeldt. I'm of Hawaiian descent, born and raised in the state of Hawaii. I've hiked, hunted, and protected Mauna Kea for over 49 years. And at 70 years of age this year, I still hike and hunt the summit at areas such as Kimole, Ahumoa, Kalukani, Kole, Maili, Kihe, Makanaka, Kanakalenui, Kahinahina, Hills 1 through 5, and of course, Skyline, down into Puakalo Gulch. My background includes being an operations superintendent for Seabrewer and Company for 32 years, a reserve police officer for 22 years, and a Mauna Kea ranger for nearly a decade. I also serve as a member for 2-year, 4-year term for Aquatic and Wildlife Advisory Committee for the County of Hawaii. I also volunteered on a native project caring for the native to restore its population successfully to Hawaii. As a police officer on special duty on Mauna Kea and as a Mauna Kea ranger on special assignments, I have diligently recorded the past and present history along with protecting the cultural sites, its natural resources, and scientific reserves. From those who come to visit and assist those who come to worship this beautiful Mauna. You may not realize or notice the important sites that I have recorded for many, many years, from the moraine formed on the rocks or the sediment by the ancient glacier melts, remnants of times past, to the hidden treasures revealed by the sunrises and sunsets as it hits the Mauna. I've hiked and researched all the TMT site and found its place on the Mauna is cleared of all ancient landmarks and is the best site for all to witness the universe and what is hidden in glorious heavens above. I hold Mauna Kea close to my heart and its heart, which is located at the base of Mauna Kea near Mauna Road. I know the mountain and have hiked every square mile area from the summit to the alpine base. I am here to tell you that, that this Mauna, from its ancient uprights to its most valued edge quarry, to the Evis of Makanaka, to the Pu'us of Poliahu, Lilinoi, and Waiau, associated with a meaningful lake to our people, known arguably as the highest lake in the United States at 13,025 feet, is certainly the best and only Mauna in the world. To put this impressive instrument capable of reaching beyond the heavens and serving the most important prominent Mauna in a way that no other telescope could compete. I support TMT and always will be committed to searching out Mauna's history of our people and continue to serve Mauna Kea. I would also like to reiterate King David Kalakaua's words. It will afford me unfeigned satisfaction if my kingdom can add its quota toward the successful accomplishment of its most important astronomical observation of the present century and assist, however humbly, the enlightened nations of the earth in these costly enterprises. Now, with this present pandemic hitting us worldwide and personally on our island, this pandemic may hit us not only with its high mortality, but also may hit us with its highest economical losses in history of our nation. We have clear answer to our economic devastation that no other state has available to them, and that is to build TMT now. It has promised to pour in billions into our economy, and it has already invested billions. There's no other state or other country in the world that has bailout to this pandemic. Even though our governor and our president of the United States has offered a freeze on mortgage foreclosures, utilities, and low-interest business loans to those hit the hardest. But somewhere along the line, the debt needs to be paid back. If it's not already too late, and if we can afford together to come as one people, we can survive this pandemic and its financial disaster through TMT. They're not giving us a loan nor asking us to pay anything back, but instead offering us a better sound economy, which is jobs, which equates to money in our pockets to feed our families and stimulate the economy of Hawaii growth, and not a party to its downfall. Please think hard about this solution and how we can survive and protect our model together as one people and one company, TMT, who believes in us and pledges to protect our Mauna and its people. Mahalo nui loa.
Thank you, Bruce. Exclamation point.
Thank you.
Kalepa.
Okay. Yeah, I just like to I agree with Kibo's statement that it's it's an issue of leadership. You know, I mean, as a navigator, right? Whenever before we voyage, we always ask the question. It's about risk management, right? I mean, and the question we ask, of course, is what do you stand to gain by doing something versus what you stand to lose by doing nothing? And right now, just speaking as a citizen, you know, I don't feel like my government's got my back. I have very little confidence in our government's ability to move the project forward, and I feel abandoned. But, you know, our species, right, the Homo sapiens, we're only 200,000 years old. You know, we've been on this planet, hominids have been on this planet for several million years, but our species has only been here for 200,000 years. And look how far we've come in 200,000 years. That's because every generation has been, has relied upon the successes of the previous generation, right? My job as a navigator really is about protecting the community. It's about exploring so that we can locate sustainable environments for the future, right? And that's why I believe in astronomy. I believe in astronomy and I believe in TMT because the exploration that TMT is going to conduct will show us options for humanity in the future. Look, I'm a pragmatist, right? I mean, I know physics, right? I know that the sun's going to consume this earth. That's a foregone conclusion. Several billion years from now, a billion years from now, the sun's luminosity will increase by 10%. In 3.5 billion years, it'll increase by 40%. And by the time it increases to 40%, life on this planet will be over. So we have a billion years to really figure out what our future is for humanity. And that telescope is going to show us either that we have a future among the stars, or we're going to perish on this planet. And so that's why I support astronomy, just going back to the very basic humanitarian needs that's going to sustain, hopefully going to sustain life of mankind. Thank you.
Mahalo, great statement. Kimo.
Peter, I am an attorney, but I have no client in this matter. I represent no one. I travel on my own expense. I am compelled to do this because I don't have much time left. I'm 63. If this is successful, it is Mailani, it is Makana Silva, it's Kupono Trent. It's the next generation of Hawaiians. I want to look at the camera and tell the TMT board that not all Hawaiians believe that the mountain is sacred and that you have no business here. That is just wrong. You have now had 2 hours of Native Hawaiians plus Paul giving you that clear message. Second, I am looking in the camera at Governor Ige. The Supreme Court has ruled the TMT has a right to develop. You, as the governor, have an obligation to preserve the peace and enforce the rule of law. If TMT moves up the mountain, it is your job as the executive to ensure the health and welfare of all involved. I beg you, it is a matter, an existential matter, that you show the leadership that's necessary. Mahalo.
Wow, thank you all. Paul, Mailani, Bruce, Kalepa, Kimo. And thank you, audience, for tuning on with us. You know, we encourage you to engage in the dialogue, you know, whatever your position is. It's an important issue. Stay informed, stay educated. And my aloha message to you is, where we live, there are rainbows and life in the laughter of morning and starry nights. Where we live, there are rainbows and flowers full of colors and birds filled with song. We can smile when it's raining and touch the warmth of the sun. We hear children laughing in this place that we love. Where we live, there are rainbows, life and the laughter of morning, and starry nights. Good night.
Aloha, Peter. Aloha, everyone.
Aloha.
Thank you,
Bye,
everybody.
everybody.